coming to today's meeting, Miami County Safety Council meeting. Program's a little bit different because we'll be in here part of the time for the presentation, and then we'll be going out those doors over there for additional information on fire extinguishers. So we're glad you're here. I think you'll enjoy the program as well. If you would, please stand as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you would, please remain standing for the invocation. Dear Lord, we meet to serve our co-workers and community, to use our safety resources wisely and well, to make decisions that promote workplace safety. We recognize our responsibility to prevent accidents and provide a safe and healthful workplace. And we seek blessings on our efforts here today. Amen. Please be seated. A couple things I want to share with you before I turn Craig loose on you. I recently read an article, and the title of the article was How to Get the Most Out of Conventions and Conferences. And I thought I'd change the title a little bit and share with you some of the parts of this article, but I'm going to tell you how you can get the most out of Safety Council meetings. And there's only three things to keep in mind, according to this, the person who wrote the article. And by the way, the person who wrote the article, his name is Richard Hawk. And Richard is known for making safety fun. Anybody in here want to make safety fun? Or funner? Or more fun? Yeah. So we want to make it fun. In fact, if you're interested, his website is makesafetyfun.com. But he's the one who wrote this article, how we can get the most out of conventions, workshops, conferences, and I say even safety council meetings. And just three things to keep in mind, and that is, the first thing is, before you get to the meeting or the conference or the workshop, write down or think about what you want to learn from that particular meeting. Now, Lindsay does an excellent job of getting notice out to you folks, every one of us, about the meeting that's coming up, the presentation that we've arranged. That's when y'all be thinking, what do I plan to get out of that meeting? So just two or three things might be helpful. Or maybe when you're driving here, think about what you want to get out of the meeting. The second thing that Richard talks about is not only do you need to be prepared to get something out of the meeting, but you also want to do some networking. In fact, you know what? Years ago, the sole purpose of the Safety Council was networking. There weren't premium discount programs. There weren't nice meals like this. There wasn't necessarily a nice room like this. It was all about networking. And so one way to get the networking thing going, Richard says that when you meet someone, you should smile as though you're meeting a longtime friend. I want to take a moment here. Look at the other person around you, or behind you, or in front of you. Take a look at them and give them a smile as if you're meeting a longtime friend.
How you doing, longtime friend? Good to see you, bud.
Wow. Wasn't that hard? And look, even Henry's smiling back there. All right.
Every now and again.
Well, the third thing is this. Share what you learn at the meeting with somebody. In other words, when you go back to work, or as it says here, maybe when you go home, share a little bit of that, what you learned at that meeting with someone else. And those three things will make it, just that much more rewarding. You'll get more out of the Safety Council. Okay, and because our schedule is a little bit different today than usual, I want to tell you a little bit about next month's meeting. The steering committee decided to have some basic introductory type of things regarding OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. And actually, I'm going to do the presentation next month. And I'm going to talk to you and share with you the 8 steps, the procedures that OSHA uses when they decide to come to your company and take a look at things. So they recently updated their field operation manual. In fact, it was just a month ago that they released those updates. And so I'm going to share with you what are the 8 steps that a compliance officer uses before they get to your workplace and while they're at your workplace. And then I'm also going to share with you the top 10 most often cited OSHA regulations. And then, although it's going to be a couple weeks after Halloween, I'm going to share with you what's called the Scary 13. And you'll have to show up at the meeting to find out what the top 10 are and what the Scary 13 are. All right, so now I'm going to have Craig give you some updates. And by the way, you might notice Craig's appearance is starting to change a little bit. It's that time of the year for him. And so Craig, he's our resident plumber, jolly old elf. Craig. Go ahead and say it.
I don't know how he meant that, but I'm going to take it as a compliment. He's talking to you about articles he read about how to make safety and how to make the safety more valuable to you. Me, I watch a documentary on musical instruments. Do you know that they actually use tin to make a tin whistle? It made me wonder, what do they use to make a foghorn? I have some updates here like I always have. This is stuff that you can get from the website that's been sent to Lindsay. If you have interest in any of the things I mentioned or you want to look at the rest of the list, please feel free to go to the Chamber's website and find this out there. Like I said it before, I can't give you the links because all I have are hyperlinks built into this. If you have any concerns that you want to bring before the Division of Safety and Hygiene, Brendan Lips, please let me know. I'm here after the meeting usually. I can help you out with stuff. I can put you in touch. Where's your Kelly? I can put you in stuff eventually with the right people to get you connected. Apparently I overlooked an email she sent, so I apologize for that publicly. We don't think a lot. This is a big month for grain bins as far as OSHA is concerned, and we don't think a lot about grain bins. They look fairly innocuous. They're just large, structures that hold things for us to use later or process as food, but they're really dangerous. So if you know people that work around grain bins, work in grain bins, there's some information about there how to make it safer for you. So please have a look at that. Monsanto put out some stuff about it. Let's see, NIOSH. We love NIOSH. We're close to NIOSH. They're a friend of ours in terms of safety and hygiene and in terms of you guys because they're one of our neighbors. They're in Cincinnati. Their national headquarters are in Cincinnati. They've looked at different kinds of supplied air respirators over the years. They've got all kinds of information about them. Supplied air respirators might be a solution if you have people that are bearded who have to wear respirators. It may be a way to wear these positive pressures so you don't have to have the tight-fitting face piece masks. Maybe. I'm not saying it is. And oh my God, this is so exciting. I read this and I got all tingly inside. Do you know that this year the respirator is 100 years old? You're not nearly as excited about that as I thought you'd be. It is. Isn't that kind of cool? Respirators have been around protecting people's lungs and what they're breathing for over 100 years. I think that's pretty cool. The CDC and NIOSH have partnered, and they've got presentations about keeping volunteers, workers, and responders safe in emergency follow-ups. Now, you might not think, or you might not have been a part of an emergency that occurred down in Dayton when the tornadoes came through. You might not have been around after the shootings in the Oregon District when that occurred. However, some of your people might want to volunteer to help. And these are things that you can make people aware to protect them while they're helping, so that they don't lose work time too. Trying to keep them safe while they do this stuff. What else have I got here? I was recently on a job site, like last week on a job site. They were doing something that was not at all related to the power lines, but they were really close to the power lines, and they didn't have any kind of signage, any kind of warnings that these live power lines were in their proximity. OSHA's got some alerts about working with lifts around power lines. Know the territory, know where you are, know what's around you. Make sure you keep your people safe. Bob said he's going to talk about some of the OSHA stuff, and I don't want to steal any thunder from him, but they just released their top 10 violations. You can look at it for fiscal year 19. Have a go at this. It's available. Fall protection led the list with over 6,000 violations. That's a lot. It's a lot for people who we know better. We know that gravity works. We know it pulls us to the ground. And yet we still take risks at elevation thinking that, what, we're going to bounce? I'm the jolly one. I'm the plump one. I'll bounce, but no other people are going to bounce. The other interesting thing here is the lockout tagout went from 4th to 5th. It's moving up the ladder. It's a pretty serious violation. Don't let that kind of stuff. That's all preventable, folks. It's all preventable. If you have folks that speak Spanish, there are all kinds of resources out there. The Center for Construction Research and Training, I mention them a lot. They've got a lot of material in Spanish. You have to give people information in a language that they understand. You can't force them to understand a language that they don't know and think that they're safe. They're not. You have to do it in a language they get. I remember reading a study years ago, I don't remember who did it, but they did a study that children fall off of tricycles at a high rate. And I thought, why would you study that? They're kids. They're going to fall down, even on tricycles. Sometimes you think, why do they do this kind of research? Well, here's another one of those research moments. A review of research says that job tenure and risk go hand in hand. If you haven't been on a job very long, you have a higher risk of getting hurt. Okay. Does that surprise anybody? It shouldn't. You've got to keep an eye on the new people because they don't know the rules yet. There's still one. There's a safety seminar coming up. It's free, employee safe. If you have, you're looking around machinery and embedded software and the uses of machinery, there's a webinar that's coming up on October 23rd. You might be able to find some information in that. Let's see. We know that we should drive or operate machinery, drive a vehicle when we're under the influence of medication. Well, the National Highway Transportation and Safety Administration has also looked at some of the things we're taking over-the-counter medication. So be careful, be aware of these things. And there's some information for our firefighters and the friends of ours that are here this month talking to us that come from the National Volunteer Fire Council and International Association of Fire Chiefs, Volunteers, and Combination Officers section. That's a mouthful. Woo! And they released a report on how firefighters can deal with reducing the effects of exposures to cancer that can hurt them. And finally, I'll leave you with this, since we're all eating. The diner at the table said, I'm a little hungry today, waiter. How big are your clam strips? And the waiter said, well, have you ever seen a chicken strip? And the customer said, well, to tell you the truth, I've never seen a chicken wear clothes.
Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.
I always love it when Craig goes before me because then the expectations are really low for what I might have to accomplish. So,
You're welcome.
since the format for today is a little different, I'm going to get up and talk now and tell you the things that I would normally tell you before we leave. Because when we dismiss to go outside for the demonstrations, we won't be back inside the room if we don't need to be. So don't forget, we do need your feedback. It's very important that you help us to shape and guide how we select speakers in the future and topics. Next month, Bob kind of clued you in on what we're going to be talking about, but I want to tell you about some of the activities that we have planned. November is a month of Thanksgiving, and so in the spirit of gratefulness, we would like to ask you to help us to bless others. We've made arrangements with the CORES, Miami County ACES program, and we'll be accepting shelf-safe food. If you have a food drive at your local business or in your community and you want to bring the food here, we'll make sure it gets to the right folks. If you would like to just make a personal donation, bring your canned goods, shelf items to the meeting with you, and we'll make sure those get to the ACES program. Also, we're in the spirit of giving and goodwill. The Miami County Safety Council would like to ask you to bring some guests with you at no cost. So if you would like to bring up to 2 guests with you, no charge, we'll buy the lunch, bring them, introduce them to the council, and see if maybe it's a good match for them as well. So one last comment. Normally we draw a name from the hat and give away a gift certificate. This year we'd like to give a fire safety inspired gift. So at each of your tables you'll find one of these little personal Fire Be Gone kits. This is for a very small fire that doesn't require much attention. But under your chair should be a mark, one at each table, for a person who will win this. So if you want to check under your chairs and see if you won this gift, this fire extinguisher. And whoever has that under their chair, please take this home.
The first person who comes and talks to me after the meeting can have this. I'm not allowed to accept it, but I have it sitting in the red chair.
I was remiss in not telling you that the local newspaper is represented here. Where are you? You must have left. Oh, there you are, back there. And also, the local TV station. It's Access TV, Channel 5. We call it the Indian Nation, right? Yep. And so, there's an instructor and a couple students that are tickled to death to be here as long as we can keep them here. In fact, we just gave them a good meal. So this will be shown later on the local TV station. One thing I noticed on OSHA's website, they have something called Quick Takes. D-Y-K. Quick Takes. Did you know? And the did you know happens to relate to today's meeting. Did you know that most common type of emergency for small businesses is a fire? Now, OSHA regards a small business as 500 or fewer employees. That pretty much takes care of everybody in this room. Number one emergency is fires. And some of you know that just 2 nights ago, the Inn in Versailles burnt down. Well, it didn't actually burn to the ground, but it's doubtful that they'll be back in business. So fires can happen, and we should learn about that. Now, back in 1951, Lee, you might remember. Sure. Only 2% of American households had a fire extinguisher. I would hope that's much higher today. Do you have any statistic on that?
I don't.
Well, we might want to update that. But here's a question for everybody, except I know Lee would know this answer. In what year was the National Fire Prevention Week decided to be in the month of October? What year did that happen? 1874. Well, if you can tell me what year, maybe you can tell me who the president was. Who was the president in 1925? Okay, Lee, tell him.
I'm going to say it was Calvin Coolidge.
It was. It was. All right, cool. Well, with that, let's hear what Lee has to say about fire extinguishers. Lee's a regular attendee here. We like to have him talk during the month of October, so please welcome him.
Well, I'm glad everybody got a chance to stand up and stretch a little bit. So we don't fall asleep after that. That was an awesome meal, by the way. My guys that joined me today were like, hey, that's a whole lot better than what we were going to have at the station. So this is Fire Prevention Week this week. And I heard somebody talk about 1870 something or other, and last year we talked quite a bit about that. That goes back based on the Great Chicago Fire, but if you were here last year, you remember me talking about, there was another fire the same day where 5 to 10 times as many people died in Peshtigo, Wisconsin. So whether you want to remember the Chicago fire or the Peshtigo fire, or just all fires that people have where people may be injured or killed or lose possessions, this week is the week that we set aside for that, and the month of October is Fire Prevention Month. So it's good times to think about fire safety and fire prevention. On that same vein, and I realized that I screwed up by allowing everybody to leave out of a side exit door as opposed to going back out the way you came in. I hope that when you came in, that you picked up some of the fire prevention materials from the table in the hallway, and I can see that I've failed to get all those materials off the table. Those items are Fire Prevention Week specific, and they come from the National Fire Protection Association, and they have this year's theme of not every hero wears a cape, plan and practice your escape. So home fire escape planning is that. If you have employees that you would like to take materials for, please feel free to grab some materials before you leave. There are posters, there are adult brochures, there's a little FPW news, which is Fire Prevention Week news. There are some kids' activities in there. I've got kids' scrap bags. If you want to take plastic bags to stuff into for your employees to take home, please help me clean that stuff out, because after we get through this month, it's not much good anymore. It's specifically dated for Fire Prevention Week 2019. So please, while it's fresh, take that to your employees and share that with them. If you haven't grabbed it yet, please do plan to grab that before you leave. I'd appreciate you helping me to get that distributed throughout the city, or throughout the county, really. I don't care if you take it to Troy, I guess that's all right. We'll deal with that. We're going to talk today about fire extinguishers. And I'm going to assume that because you are all safety professionals in this room, that the vast majority of you have had some training in fire extinguishers. So I'm going to ask, how many have had some kind of hands-on training with a fire extinguisher? Just put your hand up for me. I'm looking around, I'm seeing maybe 20% or so that have not. So most of you have, and I would expect that you should be comfortable and confident in, we're going to talk about ABC, we're going to talk about the PASS method, and we're going to go outside, we're actually going to use fire extinguishers. But we're going to get into the weeds today on fire extinguishers. And so because we are actually going to be using fire extinguishers, those of you who did not put your hand up, I would like you to look at this opportunity today to be your opportunity to try to use to use a fire extinguisher to extinguish a fire, so that you are comfortable and confident with that. If you're supposed to be here to represent safety for your organization or your business, and maybe it's just because when you have a fire extinguisher class come into your business, you don't want that to be the first time that you hold a fire extinguisher. Or maybe you're going to need to give a class on fire extinguishers, and you don't want to have never held a fire extinguisher and be teaching about how to use fire extinguishers. So today is your opportunity. We've got lots of extinguishers here. We've got several different types of fire we're going to have outside. We're going to talk about why we might choose one extinguisher over another in what situation. But don't leave here today with discomfort about extinguishers or questions about extinguishers that you don't have answered. Because I love learning about stuff. I'm going to have to go back and look up the thing now about fire extinguishers in the home. Unfortunately, we don't really have good data on a lot of that stuff. The fire service doesn't do fire safety inspections in homes required by law. We can go do fire safety surveys in people's homes if they invite us in. But the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution says we don't force ourselves as the government into people's homes. So sometimes that data can be a little tricky to try to pick up on, and we have to kind of go through different channels to get it. But I bet that's out there somewhere. I bet if I look with NFPA or the United States Fire Administration, they've got something. So over here on the table, I've got 7 different fire extinguishers, and even though some of them look the same, Promise you, every one of them has something different inside it. So we've all kind of gotten in our head what is in a fire extinguisher, or how we put fire out, or what we use to put fire out. But inside each one of these extinguishers on the table, 7 different fire extinguishing agents, and we're gonna talk about those. And there are some others. One I've got a video of, and then there's a few others that I know that we have even in businesses here in Piqua that aren't represented here, and I don't have in videos. So again, if you see something in your place of employment, and you're like, what the heck is that thing? Why is it different than what Assistant Chief Adams talked about? Why is it something that I've never heard of? Well, please call the fire station. I'll be more than happy to, if I don't know, we'll look it up, we'll figure it out, because I love learning about that kind of stuff. So before we roll into the presentation, if I forgot to say, I think I got my introduction and everything. I'm Assistant Chief Lee Adams from Piqua Fire Department. I've been there 13 years now. And I've been in the fire service for 17 years, give or take. Up here on the screen, we've got some fire extinguishers that are from back in the time where Bob was talking about where we had 2% of every home represented with a fire extinguisher. Does anybody know what any of these are, or names that you've heard them called? Because these are all free. None of them are accepted today as a listed fire extinguisher for use, but you may still see them in people's houses. You may see them in museums or places of business where they're stopped their cruising. Have you seen any of these before? I'm sure to some of you, a couple of these look a little bit familiar. These two here, there's a chemical called carbon tetrachloride, and that was really popular, like in World War II. If you had an army truck that had a fire extinguisher in it, it was a carbon tet fire extinguisher. And man, those were great fire extinguishers. Those things were little. They're only like this big around, and they're like as big as the thing on the table, maybe a little bit longer. And they could put out a lot of fire. And it was a clean agent. It didn't like have any powder. It wasn't corrosive. It wasn't damaging to electronic equipment. And people could get it on their skin and breathe it, and it didn't really cause them any problems. We're like, man, this is great. But then sometime after World War II, we found out that unfortunately, when carbon tetrachloride is heated by fire, it does put off a toxic chemical that's deadly to humans. So we've phased that out, and now I don't think anybody uses carbon tet. Probably you may find somewhere in South America or Africa or somewhere in a third world country where they're still using it, because it is very effective, but it's also very, very unhealthy for humans. This guy right here is a carbon tet grenade. Those are kind of cool. It's got a little fusible link underneath it, like you would see in a sprinkler, and it's designed with a spray-loaded contraption. Here, you might hang this thing over top of your furnace or over top of something that's a fire hazard, and if it gets hot enough, the little link falls apart, and that whole glass thing falls down on whatever is burning. And the theory is that carbon tet goes everywhere and puts out the fire. Those you will still see these. You work on old houses. If you've not seen one of these, you're probably not near the end of your career. You're probably earlier in your career. These are still out there. You have that 90-year-old woman living in the old farmhouse that she's lived in since she was 20 years old. There's a few of these out there still in the basements. We do see them on the fire department occasionally. This other guy, this is kind of cool too. This is called a soda acid fire extinguisher. You'll see those in museums quite a bit. Inside, they've ever done the volcano thing with vinegar and baking soda? You know what I'm talking about? So this is baking soda, soda water, and acid, like vinegar. When you turn that thing upside down, the acid and the soda mix, and it pressurizes that container, and you get that bicarbonate of soda water mixture that comes out under pressure. Very, very effective. But we have not allowed a riveted soda acid extinguisher to be listed in the United States since like 1982. I think I saw that. I read that in some of the ocean regulations. So the world that I live in with fire extinguishers, because it's a little bit different than some other folks. It's different than Bob or Craig and the world that they live in. I live in the world of the 2017 edition of the Ohio Fire Code. So as an enforcement agent for the city of Piqua and the State Fire Marshal's Office, I enforce the Ohio Fire Code. Paul is Mike is a inspector. He also enforces the fire code, has been through the inspection class. Jordan is wanting to go to inspector school here soon. And we enforce the Ohio Fire Code. Section 906 covers fire extinguishers. Basically, and I try to really boil this down here, most structures must have a fire extinguisher selected, installed, and maintained in accordance with NFPA 10. So NFPA 10 is that national standard that gives us all the information about how we should use extinguishers, where they should be, how they should be mounted, all that kind of stuff. And there's several pages in the fire code that basically boils down to that. We go with NFPA 10. There are some requirements for extinguishers in vehicles, fuel transportation vehicles, and fork trucks, those kind of things, those are required in the fire code. And some field work. So even if you say, well, yeah, I've got a shop and I do HVAC work. Well, you go out in the field, if you're doing hot work, which is any kind of grinding, torching, cutting, anything that produces sparks or flames, you need to have a fire extinguisher within 30 feet of where you're doing your work. And that's one that I see a lot. That maybe an HVAC tech and plumber is going to pick up their torch in one hand and a bucket full of tools in the other hand and go into a house and do work. And then we go to sweat the copper joint together and end up catching the wall cavity on fire. And they say, oh, hey, my extinguisher's back out the truck. And then they go out to the truck and they say, oh crap, that extinguisher didn't work. So keep that in mind too. There are other requirements in the fire code for that. The other side that I know that Craig and Bob know a lot more about, and I just am kind of learning about this, is OSHA 1910-157, portable fire extinguishers. Has some requirements similar to the Ohio Fire Code, but also includes a requirement for training. The Ohio Fire Code really doesn't outline anywhere specifically, and it says in Chapter 4, it talks about emergency preparations or emergency preparedness. If your employees are expected to be part of a fire brigade or utilize fire extinguishers to put fires out, then they should have training for that. But 1910-157 gives a little bit more in detail about fire extinguisher training, and that is going to be a little bit more important to you folks than it is to me. I'm not generally coming into your business looking for your training records, but your OSHA compliance officer probably is. And if there is a fire and somebody says they didn't know how to use a fire extinguisher and somebody was injured, then they're real likely to look for your compliance documents for training. So the Ohio Fire Code calls for fire extinguishers to be placed in certain locations. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these things. Based on the hazards present, we have travel distances, and my rule of thumb when I'm doing fire safety inspections is even in a light hazard business. So you work in a small building that has an office, and you have a computer and a desk and a waste paper basket, and you maybe have a couple of file boxes or a filing cabinet, but you're not stockpiling a bunch of stuff, and you're not working on vehicles inside that building. That's a light hazard occupancy, just a flat-out office space. We are never going to exceed a 75-foot travel distance to a fire extinguisher. And I don't want to get too much into this, but down here, we have maximum coverage areas in square feet as well. So these are A hazards. If you know A hazards, it's ordinary combustibles. I'm not going to try to bust anybody up on this, because I think you've all been through this already. We have a maximum floor area per unit of A, so a larger extinguisher could cover more floor area, but it says 3,000 square feet per unit of A. Minimum size of fire extinguisher being a 2A, that's a 5-pound dry cam, so we have 6,000 square feet. And if you go up to a 10-pound dry cam, you can cover up to 11,250 square feet. Now, I have yet to carry a measuring wheel or a measuring tape into a business with me. I rely quite a bit on the architect or the engineer or the fire extinguisher technician that your business hires to help you have the right fire extinguishers there. But as we walk through businesses and we say, does this look right? I don't see an extinguisher in here at all. Maybe I walked from one end of the building to the other end of the building and didn't see a fire extinguisher on the other end. This gives me somewhere to go back to and say, well, hey, you don't have enough, and here's why. We also have specific requirements for location for things like cooking equipment. So any cooking equipment, commercial cooking equipment, has to have a fire extinguisher within 30 feet. Ignitable liquid storage, also 30 feet. So if you're storing gasoline, diesel fuel, oil, any of those kind of things, you have storage for those things, there should be a fire extinguisher within 30 feet. Hot work is 30 feet also. Fueling locations goes out to 75 feet. So we're working with Sean right now on a new fueling location for school buses and lawn equipment and stuff. There will be a fire extinguisher for the fuel tank. There will be a fire extinguisher for the fueling location. It may be able to be one and the same, but we have to look at the fueling location is a little bit remote from where the tank is, and what's the snow going to be? Are we going to be plowing snow in that area? If we have a foot of snow, I shouldn't have to run across a grass yard, which today looks really easy. I can walk 75 feet across this grass yard and get to where that extinguisher is, but I got to think about in January what's that going to look like. That may have additional extinguishers there. So some things that we need to think about as we're installing extinguishers. And the one more here is, where are we putting those? So we're putting those on the distance requirements, and we're covering our square footage, but where specifically are they going? And my favorite, if somebody's asking me, is in the egress path. So we look over here on the back wall, and sorry if I blinded somebody there just for a second. Here's your extinguisher back here by this door. So if you're going to go in this space, there's one over here. If you're going to go to an extinguisher, you're going towards an exit. It's not possible for me to go towards an extinguisher and not go towards an exit. So I get that extinguisher, I come back over here where my computer's on fire, and I know that I can get back to my exit. That's why we like those extinguishers in those exit paths. Sometimes we have a tendency for maybe a doctor's office or dentist's office or a small bookkeeper's office, something like that. They say, well, I got this closet right in the middle of my office space, and I'm going to put one extinguisher there, and then it's within 75 feet of everywhere, and it covers all my square footage. I say, yes, but where is your fire going to be? You may have to go away from your exit towards that closet to get to that extinguisher. And now you put yourself in a dangerous situation where the fire is between you and your exit. So sometimes we may need more extinguishers just to have them in intelligent locations. Even though the fire code, I kind of roll my eyes when I say that, because sometimes people don't necessarily want to do the right thing or what makes sense. They want to do the minimum that they have to do based on what the requirements of the code are. And I have a hard time forcing anybody to put that near an exit because it doesn't say that in the code, but it's a really good idea. So if somebody wants to do something less than that, I say, okay, you can, but I don't recommend that. So extinguishers must have annual maintenance and monthly checks or monthly inspections. And the fire code calls out the word maintenance. It says maintenance on fire extinguishers must be performed by certified individuals. In the state of Ohio, the Ohio Fire Marshal's Office, the Ohio Department of Commerce, and the Ohio Fire Marshal's Office has a licensure program for those who are going to work on fire extinguishers. And I just took this picture because this dude in his van looked like a fire extinguisher. It says Preventative Fire and Safety Equipment, Inc., but the last name there is either in Louisiana or maybe France or in Canada or something. But that kind of work, where we're doing the annual fire extinguisher inspection, the hydrostatic test, where we're actually tearing the valve out and pulling the material out and testing that cylinder, put it back together. Those kind of things need to be done by that fire extinguisher technician. The monthly checks, though, the monthly inspections, and here's this is my line. This is Lee Adams only. Paying a third party for monthly checks is kind of a cop-out. I've seen businesses do that, and it meets the requirements of the code, because you're meeting the requirement of NFPA 10 that says you need, every 30 days you have to do the visual inspection. And so it used to be Wally Haney here at Valley Safety and Pickle. You could pay Wally, and Wally gladly come around with his stamp. He'd stamp all your extinguishers every month, and he would charge you however many dollars per extinguisher it was. But to me, part of this requirement is getting your employees to actually physically look at and put their hands on that extinguisher once a month. And that reminds them, where are those extinguishers? Are they being properly cared for? Is the mounting still look good? So let's look at these real quick here. And this, I like to tell people, if your extinguisher is in good shape and it doesn't need anything at all, that check, I can walk over to this wall and my check can be done. I got to open that door, so I'm going to add 2 seconds. In about 7 seconds. 5 seconds per extinguisher is all it should take. I am looking to make sure that the extinguisher is hanging on the wall where it should be, or in that cabinet. The mounting is solid. In this case, these are in cabinets. Oftentimes, usually the cheaper way to do that is they hang on the little fork bracket on the wall with a couple of screws in it. And it's not obstructed. You have to push the trash can or cardboard sign or hung clothes or whatever on that extinguisher. So it's not obstructed. It's there where it should be, and the mount looks good. That you don't have to touch it. I can do that to all the extinguishers in this room from right here. The safety pin is in place with a seal. It's this little guy right here. The safety pin should all be on there, and this blue plasticky thing is the seal. I was just at a business yesterday where I walk up to their extinguisher, it's hanging in a bracket on the wall, it's right by the door where employees are in and out all day, had a trash can on wheels right next to it, and under that extinguisher there was a pile of the ammonium phosphate chemical extinguishing agent, the powder from an extinguisher. I said, you had that go off on accident, didn't you? Yeah. So what happens is somebody bumps into this thing and breaks that plastic seal, and maybe the pin stays in there. Well, then the next person that bumps it, the pin falls out. And maybe it still didn't go off. But the next person that bumps it hits that handle and pushes the valve down, and now you have extinguishing agent that comes out all over the floor, makes a huge mess. And I can tell you, in the last 13 years that I've been at Pickle Fire, I think I've seen that happen 4 times on a fire truck. Where you have an extinguisher in a cabinet, and the seal gets broken off, and the pin falls out, and it rolls around the cabinet. Someone hits it. We had one on a boat one time. One of our rescue boats, we had a member that was moving around inside the boat, hit that extinguisher and set it off, made a huge mess. That F-15 had that before you guys got hired. Back extinguisher went off in the back of it. So those are all, I mean, it's really, really easy. And then on the tag, on that paper tag hanging on the extinguisher, if you flip that over on the back side, it'll say January through December. You take the box for the month that you're in, put your initials and the date that it is today, and you have just met all the requirements for monthly checks on that extinguisher. You've met the requirements of NFPA 10, you've met the requirements of the Ohio Fire Code for monthly checks on your extinguisher. Then once a year, you get that redone by your fire extinguisher technician. Extinguishers must be the correct type for the hazards present. So here's where we're going to get more into some of this stuff. I told you that so I can get to this. What are our primary types of fire or fire extinguishers? You all had fire extinguisher training. What are those primary types of fire? Anybody? Electric's one. What's the letter that goes along with that? Do you remember?
Electrical is C.
C. Good. Okay, so we got C in electrical. What else do we have in there?
A is ash.
A is ash. That's ordinary combustibles, wood, paper, cardboard. Okay. Anybody else? If you get the third big one, then we'll throw the other two in for you. B, which is chemicals, liquid fuels, gasoline, diesel fuel, liquid fuels, like this stuff. But gosh, darn it, even those that A and B can kind of branch out a little bit. We're going to talk about that some more. So A, common combustibles, wood, paper, cloth, this is what we're seeing most of the time on the extinguishers is these pictograms. That's a trash can, a little campfire. B, flammable liquids and gases, gasoline, propane, solvents. That is a jerry can or gasoline can, that pictogram. C, energized electrical equipment, just have an extension cord with an outlet there. And then the other two that are kind of weird is D, and that's combustible metals. I know we have that at, anybody here from Hobart today here at Piqua? So I know Hobart and Piqua's got combustible flammable metals, fire extinguishers, and we've had a few flammable metals incidents there. We've got a place on Fox Drive that's got flammable metals there, does some polishing and stuff. And then the other one is K, for cooking media. Oils and fats, greases, vegetable oils, animal fats, this kind of things for cooking media. And we're going to, let's hit on this, let's do our first video here. This is like a minute and a half. Flammable metals don't act like anything else. So the problem with flammable metals is once you get a metal burning, and that could be magnesium, titanium, sodium, lots of different flammable metals, they can provide their own oxygen, and they're really, really hard to put out. And when you put water onto a lot of flammable metals, they react with the water and will separate hydrogen and oxygen and almost cause an explosion. You can have, look like starbursts coming off flammable metals. So this is just a quick little video that shows a flammable metals fire extinguisher in use. And I think the agent in this extinguisher is going to be sodium chloride or just regular table salt. But it's going to be in a very fine powder. So what you see in there that looks like open up the gates to somewhere we don't want to be is just that flammable metals. And you see this firefighter standing behind there, and he has, there you can see the wand and the distribution on the end of there. That can be sodium chloride, it can be graphite, it can be copper. There's a product called Metalex, and all that depends on what kind of flammable metals you deal with. So if you work in a machine shop or a grinding place or the welding rod place, in order to know what type of fire extinguisher that's going to be for flammable metals, they have to know what type of flammable metals you're likely to have. And of course, some are more expensive than others, and some are more effective on different types of flammable metals than others. But I show you that just so you have some introduction to flammable metals and how we expect them to be different. Now the guy's going to walk up here with a stick. He's going to stir that up a little bit, and while it looks like that's out, once he takes that sodium chloride or whatever that agent is and starts to move it around a little bit, you can see inside there that stuff is still burning, still plenty hot enough that it'll take off and burn again. And our goal with flammable metals is just to cover them up well enough that they don't catch anything else on fire until they burn themselves out. A business can choose to utilize a multi-purpose extinguisher. That's our ABC. I think everybody's familiar. There's probably not anybody, does anybody in this room not have an ABC extinguisher where you work? And I guess if you don't have any extinguishers, don't raise your hand because I don't want to know. But everybody probably has at least an ABC extinguisher. You may have some of these others, but you probably at least have an ABC. That's these guys represented by these guys over here. And I'll pull out my regular old ABC over here. Let's try to take these down as I talk about them, so I don't forget to talk about any of them. Regular ABC extinguisher, chemical inside, it's called MAP or monoammonium phosphate. It's very effective on ordinary combustibles. It melts and smothers and puts out an ordinary combustible. It takes oxygen away from liquid fuels. It's effective on those, and it doesn't conduct electricity, so it's safe to use around energized electrical equipment. And then you say, well, gee, these things are relatively inexpensive. Why wouldn't I just use that all the time? Well, that's what we're going to spend the rest of the time on today. This other extinguisher over here, does anybody have one that looks like that? Anybody have one of them in your shop somewhere? One back here? I'm surprised there's not more. If you go back and look, and like if anybody has your electrical service room, like where you have your breaker panels and that kind of stuff, if you've got one room that's got a whole bunch of electrical equipment, disconnects equipment in it, I'd be surprised if you're in a large facility, if you don't have an extinguisher like this. This is carbon dioxide, liquid carbon dioxide inside this extinguisher, stored under pressure as a liquid. When it comes out, it's a gas, and it makes that white cloud. If anybody's ever been to a Friday night football game, and you see one of the parents standing out there where the kids are running out of the tunnel at, and they're spraying that fire extinguisher, making that big white cloud that the guys run through, that's usually carbon dioxide. That's a CO2 for an extinguisher. These guys are really good at taking oxygen away from liquid fuels, so they can extinguish a liquid fuel fire or a bee fire. They don't conduct electricity, so it's safe to use around energized electrical equipment. So it has a B and C rating. So we talked about the ABC extinguisher. This here is a BC extinguisher, and we will get to use both of these outside today on some different fires. But this is general. I think this is probably a 10-pound CO2 extinguisher. These are 3 5-pound dry chem extinguishers. You're probably going to have a neighborhood of $150 to buy either one. One CO2 extinguisher or 3 5-pound dry chem extinguishers. You say, well, if they both put out, a B and C fire, then why not get ABC extinguishers? Well, we're going to talk about why this is bad as we go on. But the multi-purpose dry chemical is very corrosive. It has a lot of things that we don't like about it. Times we may not want to use that. An electrical switch here we talk about. Is that where yours is at? We have electrical equipment, something like that?
Yeah, and we have some halons too that we still.
We're going to touch on those too. We're not going to spray any halons today because that's expensive. We do have
It's very unsafe to use that too.
bad for the environment. Yeah, there's lots of
Bad for
things.
your lungs.
Lots of things with halon. CO2 is just the stuff that we breathe out. It's the stuff that plants take in, so it's not nearly as damaging. Now, I wouldn't want to go into a closet and discharge that whole CO2 extinguisher, because I'm probably not going to have enough air to breathe. That's not really a great idea. But at the same time, I don't want to breathe this dust either. If anybody's been around an ABC extinguisher that's been set off, if you get a good whiff of that stuff, it takes your breath away also. But this stuff, very corrosive, damaging to electrical equipment, damaging to computer equipment, damaging to any kind of metals if it doesn't get washed off, cleaned off right away. Very, very clean. Carbon dioxide, very, very clean, leaves nothing but that like carbon dioxide snow that comes out of it. So there are some reasons why we may want to look at different kinds of fire extinguishers. In addition to those extinguishers we are going to use outside today, here are a couple of other options. A Class K. Does anybody have a Class K in your business? Do you have any restaurateurs here? And I know that we had the folks from Rummers have already left. I know that they've got one in their kitchen. When they come and go to some of our downtown food events, they bring those out for us. Class K is a wet chemical. Used to be in kitchens. If you saw, they had the fire suppression hoods above a stove or an oven. They would have sodium bicarb, dry chemical extinguishing agent in them. And it's been probably 20 years ago that changed to a wet chemical extinguishing agent. The wet chemical that we use today, anytime we have an operation that produces grease-laden vapors, so we say, even a griddle. Normally we think of this with deep fryers, but even if you have a griddle and you're frying hamburgers or bacon, anytime you're producing grease-laden vapors, this K extinguisher is required. K extinguisher, that wet chemical, is less likely to damage cooking equipment or contaminate food. So think about if you take a box of baking soda and you throw it across the kitchen, that powder gets out into the air and lands on everything, everywhere, and everything has to be pretty much thrown away and all new stuff. Now, we don't like to spray wet chemical around in the kitchen and eat the stuff that was there, but it's a lot less likely to be airborne and go out and actually cause problems in application for us. So wet chemical extinguisher. Let's watch a quick little video here about a wet chemical K extinguisher. Sound guy back there? If we don't get any sound, then you might be a little bit given a reprieve, and we'll just show the video and talk about. Here's this guy with this wet chemical extinguishing agent. He's showing how to use it. You've all used, most of you have used a fire extinguisher before, but we've got a grease fryer, a deep fat fryer over here. This liquid extinguishing agent comes out. You have a grandma that made lye soap? That's a weird question, right? So the liquid that's in a K extinguisher, this guy right here, is an alkali, like lye. And when we mix that with animal fat or vegetable oil, we get a soap. It's a process called saponification. And that's exactly what's going on here. When we put this extinguishing agent onto that cooking media, it turns that into a non-flammable soap, basically. Very, very effective. The other problem we run into with cooking fires like that in grease is that oil, if it catches on fire, the oil was at 300 to 400 degrees to start with. By the time it catches on fire and the temperature starts to go up, and sometimes fires are caused by oil that was too hot, that oil is really close to wanting to light off without even having a spark to make it want to light off. So wet chemical extinguishers, very effective on cooking media fires. They also, because we're wet chemical, very effective on ordinary combustibles, so wood, paper, and cardboard. And when you have a fire that is something ordinary combustibles, like an ash, it's very effective. But because it's that alkali liquid, it is a conductor of electricity. So we cannot use wet chemical extinguisher around energized electrical equipment. And if you're thinking there to yourself at all, or if you work in a food service place like stoves and deep fryers and all that have electricity to them, I can explain a lot more of that to you. But basically, if we're going to use this extinguisher, we activate the hood system. There should be a pull. Either the hood system activates automatically by the fusible links, or we pull the pull ring for that hood station, set that off, and that automatically trips out all the power to all those devices and shuts off everything when it activates. And then if there's any fire left, we go ahead and put it out to this extinguisher here. That's how that's designed to work. We talk about halon. Halon is another quote-unquote clean agent. It eliminates residue that may get in image-sensitive electronics. So we say halon a lot in a computer, like an IT room. If anybody's got, like an IT rack room, your IT folks may even be more familiar with this. They like halon because they know that it's not, the sprinklers overhead. All they know about the sprinklers overhead is when those go off, black water comes out and it ruins my computer. And all they know about, these multi-purpose dry chemical extinguishers is when one of those goes off, it's got corrosive powder in it that ruins my computer. But they really like halon. It's supposed to be a clean agent. And there are different kinds of, I think the term in the industry is halogenated or halogenated agents. Clean Guard, halon, and there's halon 1211, there's halon 13 something. There are different formulations of stuff. The worst of it, that's the terrible stuff for the environment, I believe in the United States, the only folks that can use it is the military. There are other types of halon, but they get more expensive to produce, and we pay a premium because they're bad for the environment, but they're really, really clean. So the other thing to think about with halon, though, I don't know how many can see this, but this extinguisher here, it's got two little pictograms on it. Because I'm up here close and I know what's on there already. This one on the left is B. It has a picture of a gas can. This one on the right is C for energized electrical equipment. So that extinguisher is safe and effective on liquid fuels and energized electrical equipment. This one here also halon. What's that there? That's a trash can. So this halon extinguisher is, and the only difference is it's bigger. So a halon extinguisher of this size, about like a 5-pound dry chemical extinguisher, which would have a 2A rating, and that 2A says how many units of ordinary combustibles that extinguisher would put out. If it was a dry chem extinguisher, that size, it would have a 2A. That one doesn't have any A rating. This extinguisher, that's the size of a 10-pound dry chem extinguisher, like this guy has a 4A rating, this one is 2. So not nearly as effective on ordinary combustibles as multi-purpose dry chemical, but if you get a big enough one, it is somewhat effective on ordinary combustibles, but very, very clean is the ultimate, what the takeaway on that is. Halon, very, very clean, very, very expensive, not good to breathe, not good for the environment, but effective. So we don't use those much anymore. It has to be a pretty specific reason why we're using halon. There's some other cases where an extinguisher may cause some harm. ABC chemical interaction with other chemicals. ABC chemical corrosiveness to metals, we talked about that. ABC chemical is a cardiac sensitizer. And boy, this is a weird one. I got into this with the Upper Valley Career Center, put in a new vet tech center, and they have a little surgery suite in there where they do minor surgeries on animals. And I got to talking to Amorex, the fire extinguisher folks, about what kind of extinguisher they should have. They said, well, you know that ABC ammonium phosphate is a cardiac sensitizer. What? This is new to me. So if you get that chemical, that ABC chemical, not just to breathe in a little bit or on your skin, but in an open incision, it can cause a dysrhythmia. And those who are prone to dysrhythmia obviously are at higher risk for that. I'm not likely, if I get a little of that powder in an open cut, to have a heart attack and die, but it is something to know about. And so we don't want to use an ABC dry chemical extinguisher in a surgery center, because that's another place where we want some kind of a clean extinguisher so that we're not dealing with a cardiac sensitizer, we're not dealing with a corrosive chemical, and that's what we're going to watch one more video on this little guy right here. Chemicals or CO2 and breathing difficulty. So we talked about if you get a snort full of that ABC dry chemical powder, or if I'm in a small room, confined room with carbon dioxide, that could be kind of damaging to my ability to breathe and sustain my own life. Interaction with the fuel. So if I use talk about this guy for just a minute. It's a plain water fire extinguisher. And if I had to guess, these two guys here, if they've ever been on a fire call and used a fire extinguisher, it's probably been one of these. Right? So firefighters, to a firefighter, this is the extinguisher that we use most often. Inside here, by design, is just plain water. Go to the garden hose, fill it up, screw the top back on. It's got a little Schrader valve on the back. We put air pressure into it. And these are awesome for what kind of fire? A, B, or C? A. These are awesome for A fires. Awesome for wood, paper, cardboard, that kind of stuff. But we don't want to use this around energized electrical equipment because it does conduct electricity, and can electrocute. Shock me if I use that with energized electrical equipment. And what happens when I put water into a burning liquid? Also not good, right? So we have just an A rating on this extinguisher. No B, no C. Plain water, really, really great for ordinary combustibles. The most like 90% plus. If a firefighter grabs a fire extinguisher, it's going to be one of these guys. We'll take it into a house. If just the couch is on fire, we may take one of these guys in with us and put the couch up. And they're very effective on ordinary combustibles. Very safe for us to use, as long as we're not dealing with liquid fuels and energized electrical systems. Bad for the environment, we talked about halon. Class C hazards, electrical conductivity, we talked about that. So here's where this little guy is going to come in. That's this extinguisher here. And I'm going to let the video, is our sound guy back yet? No? So we will bring the video up. I'll let it play, and I'll talk to you. I get no breaks today. It's all right. These guys will tell you I don't mind talking.
Starting with the Montreal Protocol in 1988, the future of Halon 1211 was sealed. As concerns about ozone-depleting chemicals grew, the search for an alternative to Halon 1211 began. No less than 12 screening agents have been touted as the answer to replacing Halon 1211. Amorex, the world's largest manufacturer of hand-portable fire extinguishers for commercial and industrial use, and the first fire equipment manufacturer to be certified under ISO 9000, has spent the last 8 years testing alternative clean agents to take the place of Halon 1211. No single agent was found to be environmentally friendly, inexpensive, non-toxic, electrically non-conductive, and effective on Class A fires involving fabrics, electrical insulation, and deep-seated wood fires. Given the lack of a single appropriate agent, Amerex developed a new application of water. By using a fine mist spray and an applicator wand, the extinguisher may be used around live electrical equipment. Of course, it is always necessary to shut off power to any electrical equipment involved in a fire incident. NFPA 10, Section 3-5 says, electrical equipment should be de-energized as soon as possible to prevent reignition. This fine mist application makes the water more effective than conventional water sources in putting out Class A fires, whether they are surface burning only or deep-seated. This also prevents unnecessary fallout or overspray that is common with dry chemical extinguishers. The water in its soft discharge, electrically non-conductive pattern is confined to only the area and equipment involved in the fire. Since distilled water is required for use in the extinguisher, impurities are kept to a minimum, reducing damage to delicate equipment. There is no fear of toxicity or respiratory problems since no gas or dry chemical is released into the immediate atmosphere. The extinguisher is simple to train with and inexpensive to recharge. There are no worries about future availability of the agent, nor are there any concerns about harmful environmental impact. Employees are already familiar with water and how it works on a fire. Application on a fire is almost instinctive. The extinguisher uses a stainless steel cylinder, which is painted white, a heavy-duty chrome-plated brass valve, and a coated application wand. The entire construction is non-magnetic, so it may be used in magnetic-sensitive environments such as MRI facilities. Why worry about the future, cost, and availability of alternative clean agents when the one agent that is the choice of novice and professional firefighters alike is available in a safer, more effective piece of hardware that may fit your needs? Facilities such as hospitals, telecommunication facilities, high-tech manufacturing, and wood processing all could benefit from the use of this extinguisher by gaining greater safety firefighting effectiveness and less agent-caused damage. The Amerex Model 272 water mist fire extinguisher is the safe, effective alternative to clean agents. It is simple to use, poses no environmental or respiratory problems, easy to clean up, and inexpensive to recharge. Water used in a fine mist may be exactly what you've been looking for. Amerex, the most innovative manufacturer of hand portable and wheeled extinguisher.
That's enough of an Amerex commercial. I'm sure there's other companies that are making those also. It wasn't really my intent to speak for them. But, so the water mist extinguishers can be a good choice in some instances where if you're dealing with primarily ordinary combustibles, you don't really have a problem with gasoline or diesel fuel where you're at, and you want to have something safe around energized electrical equipment. So the downfalls I can see, one is we don't deal with liquid fuels. One is it is water, so it freezes. So it's not really one that you may want to throw on a service truck that's going to be parked out in the barn in January. And also, it is more expensive to purchase a water mist extinguisher than a regular dry chem, mostly because there aren't that many out there. I think as these get more popular, the cost will probably come down. But really some good options. And we do see these a lot coming in the medical field, is where we're seeing them initially at. But I think we're going to see those more as we get farther along in time. And we can actually set this guy off today. We'll get to use that. I got a couple of fires to set outside where we can use that one. Before I finish up, I should talk about one other extinguisher I brought with me today. This one looks a whole lot like, activates a whole lot like, and you might think that it was an ABC dry chemical extinguisher. What do we got? What do we got right there? But what's the difference between it and the ones next to it? It's got a red line through the trash can. This is a BC dry chemical extinguisher. It is not an ABC dry chemical extinguisher, and there is a difference. And when we get to use this guy outside, you'll see that it's, I'm going to say generally, completely ineffective on ordinary combustibles. You will see these sometimes, and where people get hung up is buying extinguishers for their house usually. If you go to the hardware store and go to buy an extinguisher, you say, hey, this one's 35 bucks and that one's $28, why don't I get the cheaper one? Well, look real close and make sure that's not a BC only extinguisher, because if you have things other than liquid fuels in your house that may burn, you want to make sure you have an extinguisher that can put that out. So how about at home? Recommendation, 2A size, that's a 5-pound extinguisher next to the microwave there. That's a 5-pound extinguisher hanging on the wall next to the kitchen. Extinguishers should be mounted on the wall in or near the kitchen. That's our primary. The most fires that we have, if you remember from the presentation last year, the most fires in residences are in the kitchen, in cooking fires. Deadly fires are more often when we're sleeping. Oftentimes we can't deal with those with a fire extinguisher anyway. The ones that we can deal with a fire extinguisher are usually going to be in the kitchen more often than anywhere else. Available in a hardware or home store here in Piqua. You're looking at Home Depot, Ace Hardware, Walmart should have 5-pound dry chem extinguishers. Lowe's and Menards, I don't know, all the True Value, all those different places are going to have good fire extinguishers, but they're going to cost a little more than the cheap you see other places. These guys, if you buy a 5-pound commercial dry chem extinguisher, it's probably more like $50 to $75. And the difference is this is a single-use, 12-year lifespan. If you own it for 12 years and didn't use it, throw it away and buy another one. If you do use it, anytime that time, throw it away and buy another one. These are not ones that typically get torn apart and inspected and reassembled by a fire extinguisher technician. Yes?
Can I add something? Kiddo, which does a lot of home fire extinguishers, had a massive recall. And you send in your old one and they send you a new one. So if you have a kid home fire extinguisher, you should probably go on the website and see if you should.
Yeah, if it's more than about a year or two old, I would get on the Kidde, K-I-D-D-E, Kidde website, look that up, and they do have information on there about how to go back to the recall. And those are the plastic handles. If you had a Kidde that has a metal handle, it's probably not in that recall, but if you have a Kidde that has a plastic handle, and those were, there was probably a bad plastic handle for the break, and then you couldn't use the darn thing. So yes, that's a good point, thank you. I'm not, pull aim, squeeze, sweep, pull the pin, you're going to break that seal, we're going to go over that outside if you've not done this before. Aim at the base of the fire, not through the flames. Squeeze the handles together, sweep side to side. It looked like 80% plus of you all in here have probably been beat to death and beat over the head with past method. So we're going to kind of gloss over that. Here it is, it was presented, we'll go over it again outside if you have questions about that. How about this one? Which hand to hold the extinguisher and which one to hold the nozzle? Anybody? All right. It doesn't matter. There's almost every book that's got anything in writing about using extinguishers says use the right hand for this, the left hand for that, or the left hand for this. Use your strong hand or your dominant hand. We just did like 700 students at the Upper Valley Career Center in fire extinguisher training, and you watch them pick it up, and they go, I didn't like it, they sit down, and they switch their hands. It's fine. You use whatever hand is more comfortable. You might pick up the extinguisher in your right hand and the nozzle in your left hand and go, I just had carpal tunnel surgery in my right hand, I just can't squeeze that thing. So you switch it out, put the extinguisher in your left hand and hold the nozzle in your right hand. I don't care. It doesn't matter. So before we go outside, we do not have a drawing today. When we're done outside, we're done for the day. So if you want to take your things with you, and please don't forget to go back there in the hallway and grab some fire prevention materials to take with you. And one other. When I came inside, the wind was blowing out of the southeast. So if you have any problem at all with your allergies or any other breathing difficulties, right up in here, I am here. We're going to go out this door and go over here. We got stuff set up right up here by the dumpster. We're going to burn that, and the wind appears to be blowing up this way, towards that direction. So as long as you're around on this side, you should be upwind of where, and the worst of it's not the fire, the worst of it's going to be some of these dry chemical extinguishers and the powder that comes out of them. So none of it's going to kill you, but if you already have COPD and you're having difficulty breathing today, I don't want you breathing this stuff in and having to call the ambulance, or these guys here probably didn't bring an ambulance with them. Oh, it is out there. Oh, okay, well, never mind then. Go around to the far side. Get yourself a big student full, we'll see how it is. Does anybody, before we go outside, does anybody have any other questions? If you have something where you're just like, hey, I got something specific for my business, I'm here for more than an hour yet, because I got lots of cleanup to do when we're done. We should be done in 20 minutes by the time we get through burning stuff and setting extinguishers off. If you want to use an extinguisher and you don't get to it in our presentation, I got lots of extinguishers here. So please, everybody should get to do anything you want to do, ask questions you want to ask. But let's go outside and burn some stuff. If you find firefighters that like burning stuff, it is not an environmentally friendly gas can. It's the gas can that works, isn't it? So, who would like to volunteer to be one of our first to use an extinguisher? This guy here is going to be our first one I'm going to ask you to use. If you've never used an extinguisher, now's your opportunity. If you have and you want to show off your skills, it's a great opportunity. Get that CO2 extinguisher right there. Okay, we'll remove this dry can before you burn up.
Oh, well, let's see. All right, which one?
So this is your water. That does not help, does it? Okay, that's going to be the end of that. Grab that CO2 extinguisher. Did you go over the pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead and break your seal off, pull the pin out. There you go. Okay. And that horn, you can stay about 6 or 8 feet back. So from right there, squeeze your handles together. You're done. Very, very effective on that fire. Now come over here to this pile of wood while you've got that extinguisher in your hand. And give that a good shot of Still flaming, both of them. All right. So we see the difference in effectiveness for carbon dioxide. This is a big extinguisher, a lot of agent in there, and you can keep hitting that for a while. Good. I got one more thing for you to do with that before we're all done. But you can see when you run out of agent, it's still burning down inside of there. The one in the back is already flamed again. The one in the front here is just going to take off and flame again. Okay. Hang on to that. You can set it down, but keep it with you, all right? I've got the BC extinguisher here. Who will use the BC extinguisher for me? I got to get my diesel fuel can burning again. Is that the BC? Yep. Go ahead. You got it. Give her a shot there on the diesel fuel pan. That's it. Very effective on ordinary, on liquid fuel. Come over here and try that again on your... See what it does. And I don't, you could probably keep going and keep going and keep going and have some more effectiveness. My guess is, usually if we give that a few seconds, that fire comes right back again. I'm going to get my, it is smoking a lot. And I need to get it burning again so I can get my torch going. What's that? Moment, I'm doing okay. Who will grab a ABC dry chemical extinguisher? That's the other one over there by the white one.
Nobody, Steve. Nobody.
Go ahead and hit your liquid fuel over there. There you go. And let's see, if you would, just hit this guy right here. Try not to put out the one in the back for me.
Yeah.
Okay, good job. That got the one in the back. The one in the front is probably going to take off again just because we didn't put very much on there. But your BC, the sodium bicarbonate extinguisher, I think if you would keep putting that on there, would probably knock it down some. But you pretty much extinguished that fire. It's still smoking, and it's going to come back. We didn't put enough on there to put it all the way out. Before everybody walks away totally. You got that CO2 back there? Take that CO2 and give that thing a hit. So this foam, even though it looks like a solid fuel, my point there was that polyurethane foam, and this is just a cushion out of a recliner. This stuff burns so much more like a liquid. You can, if you watch that when it was burning, it melts and drips and turns into a liquid as it burns. So CO2 can be very effective on things that burn like a liquid, and where we think of that is in that electrical service room, so where we have that wiring. If your biggest, the thing that's most likely to burn is the wiring inside that switchgear box. That PVC insulation on that wiring, as it melts and drips and burns, it can be put out with a BC extinguisher, with a CO2 extinguisher. That's why we can't think of just things that are solid as A's and things that are liquids as B's. I'm gonna light this thing up again. Let's try that. Try that BC. Who's had the BC extinguisher? Burning good for you. Use that BC extinguisher to knock that thing back for you. So again, your BC extinguisher, very effective on, is that Medic 2 or is that? You guys are already here.
71-year-old male with chest pain.
ABC powder is still floating on top of there. It doesn't even want to go back and burn where that was at. That ABC powder gives it a layer and tries to keep it. Who else we have? Somebody that hasn't used one yet. We got that water mist extinguisher over there, that white extinguisher.
Yeah, I'd like to try it.
Go right ahead. Start on that liquid fuel pan over there.
That's not going to.
Well, and I don't, it doesn't have any rating for that.
Okay.
But we don't really have very much fire burn in there, and I'm curious to see what it does. Just stay back far enough. What you should see is a mist come out of that guy. Get up right there closer on it.
I've seen those.
You may be able to put out a small liquid fuel fire with that mist, and it actually worked better than that straight stream of water out of that other one did. Could use that on our pad over there.
Basically, all that's gonna do is cool it.
Yep, you can see it's still burning down inside there. So that's not even as effective on that cushion as the carbon dioxide or the BC was. But you could put it out with that, and it's not unsafe. It's just not quite as effective
I
as
had
it.
a question about something you were saying earlier.
Yes, sir.
On the ABC extinguishers, which most of us have, okay? It's not, okay, I would hesitate to use it on electrical equipment because it's going to damage the equipment. But if that's all you have, that's all you have.
That's all you have, and that's it. That's important. Now, I didn't say that in the presentation. Putting the fire out is the biggest thing, right?
Well,
If
that's
the whole
why-
building burns down,
You know where I was going.
right, then we kind of failed if the whole building burns down. But what we're trying to avoid, and IT guys are the worst for this. I hope there's not anybody from IT in the group for this. But they're like, well, if my computer gets messed up, then the whole world falls apart, right? So it's important, and we may be looking at several tens of thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, of damage that can be done by ABC dry chemical to a computer system or to an electrical system like that. So if we can choose an extinguisher that's clean, like CO2, water may not even be a bad choice. It's deionized water. Well, we have that electrical rating on here. This is deionized water in a very fine mist. This may be better for computer equipment than this is. I would guess it probably is.
One of the biggest things that I've found myself is on the ABC extinguishers, okay? A lot of times, if we cut off part of the fire triangle, right?
Yes, sir.
That's our biggest key to putting the fire out.
And fuel, heat, and oxygen.
Right.
So
So like on a machine, if you have a machine that's actually burning, if you can kick back the oxygen supply or whatever, you'll have a fire going out.
yes, if you can take oxygen away from it, and that's exactly what the problem is here. This extinguisher is really good, sodium bicarb, BC, really good at taking oxygen away from the fire. So it was effective on this foam, it was effective on this fuel, but not terribly effective on this pile of wood over here. I'm going to try to get a little better notion. Because what happens that and I'm just about out of pressure here. What happens is this material is still hot. Even when I take the oxygen away from it, it has its own heat, that latent heat, the heat that charcoal has down inside there. And so I've taken the oxygen away from it, I knocked the flames down, and even at that, when the oxygen can come back, it's still hot enough to come back and start burning on its own. And I ran this thing empty, and it's done. The CO2 extinguisher is not going to do any better on that. Water mist, plain water. Nope, still didn't get it. Maybe, is Doug Dittmer still here?
Right here.
What kind of wood did you give us, man? This didn't want to go out. So, and here is why this is a 10-pound ABC dry chem extinguisher. That was a pretty small fire, and it's still burning. So, imagine if you have that fire extinguisher in your house that's the size of a can of hairspray, and you've got a fire like that that is in your house or in your garage that you're trying to put out. A 2.5 pound, a 1A extinguisher is the smallest that has any rating. And all these, this is a 10 pound, this is a 10 pound, this is the same as a 10 pound. Sorry, all three of these are 10 pounds. So that 5 pound is what you usually see in an office, half this. The 2.5 pounder 1A extinguisher is half that. Those guys are like this big around, they're like this tall. They still have a good commercial metal handle on them. Those extinguishers, I tell folks, if you've got a fire that's like a waste paper basket on fire, you can put it out one time and you are out of agent. That is all you got. If you got a 5 pounder, you can usually put that out and have a little bit left to go back after it. This 10 pounder, now I admit, we put that fire out, we put this fire out, and put that fire out, and now it's still flaming. See, this one over here is still flaming too. The CO2 is probably the most effective on the foam rubber, which is really odd. You would not have expected CO2 to be real effective on a foam rubber fire like that. This guy over here still burning down inside there. And I don't mind if it burns out because we got a spot here where it can kind of go down and leave ashes. But just bring that up to show you that if you think having that little bitty baby extinguisher in the house is a good enough extinguisher, it probably ain't. When you have a fire, if that puts it out, you're lucky, and you got nothing left to be able to finish putting it out. This is what's hanging in my kitchen. My wife hated it for about 2 days, and then she's never noticed it since. But a 10-pound dry chem is what's hanging in my kitchen at home. I would recommend that 5-pounder. They're $30-40 at the hardware store. You hang it on the kitchen wall. You might think that thing's ugly, and I don't want to look at it, but after a few days of being there, you'll get over it. You know, once it hangs on the kitchen wall for a few days, you'll never notice it again. Don't put it under the sink, because it always ends up behind the Dawn dish soap and behind the Ajax and behind everything else that's under the sink. When you need it, you won't be able to find it. It'll be back there where it's out of sight and out of mind. It should be hung up on the wall in the bracket that it come with. Does anybody else have any other questions or want to try any of these extinguishers that are here, except that's not an extinguisher, any of the extinguishers that are here, you can use. All these need to be recharged. All of them have a little bit left in them. I've got plenty more pins. I've got the seals. I got a whole box of seals over there. If you've never tried pulling a pin, breaking a seal, I can put the seals back in it. They've got a couple of places I can still relight fires for you. I mean, I am done with you guys. I think I've covered everything I wanted to. I've beat you up with information today, and I hope that you took something away from what we talked about. But if you have any other questions, something specific for your business, or something at home, or something that I said and didn't make sense, please come up and ask, because I'm more than happy to talk about this stuff. I love dealing with fire safety. So,
does furniture give off very much deadly gas?
Oh, absolutely. When it burns?
Yeah.
Well, really all the time. So since we have switched from cotton and wool and wood furniture to really cheap wood, along with polyurethane foam and synthetic coverings, even when it just sits in your house, it's off-gassing. You know, new furniture has a smell. You know, that fabric and it's like a new car smell, is glue usually. So even when it's sitting there, it's putting off bad gases. But when it burns, it burns just like diesel fuel. And we don't have cotton and wool and normal fabrics in our homes anymore. I mean, that's in my house, and I bet it's in everybody's house here. You have a polyurethane foam recliner, and a polyurethane foam couch, and a polyurethane foam mattress on the bed because it's cheap. I mean, they're $1,000. I get it. But if you had that, it was wool and cotton and real metal springs, and like they used to build stuff, it'd probably be $2,000 to build the same thing. You know, it's cheaper that way. We can cover them in aramid fibers. You know, firefighters, our gear is made out of Nomex fiber that doesn't burn in the normal atmosphere. There are nice soft fibers we could cover couches with, but then they'd be $3,000, right? If we covered them in fire-resistant materials. So what they tried doing initially was putting a fire retardant chemical in those couches, but then they found out that was a carcinogen. So, you know, just sitting in it would cause cancer, and then when it caught on fire, it put off even more carcinogens. So we've quit doing that, and now we're back to just having polyurethane foam furniture. So I hope that answers your question, but it's a big yes. You know, they do put off lots of bad chemicals just sitting normally, and especially when they catch on fire.